The atmosphere inside the National Mosque in the central area of Abuja today was completely filled with deep sorrow and an incredibly heavy sense of solemn reflection as the absolute highest levels of the Nigerian political class gathered for a highly emotional event. If anyone had told political observers just a few weeks ago that we would be seeing these specific individuals standing shoulder to shoulder in the exact same room, they would have called it absolutely impossible. But today, the deeply tragic passing of Hajiya Umma El-Rufai, the beloved mother of the former governor of Kaduna State, Malam Nasir El-Rufai, has completely paused one of the most intense and highly explosive political battles in recent Nigerian history. In an incredibly breathtaking moment that currently has the entire nation talking, the National Security Advisor, Malam Nuhu Ribadu, was seen sitting in close proximity to Malam Nasir El-Rufai during the solemn Janazah prayers. To truly understand the absolute magnitude of this specific moment, you have to look very closely at the incredibly bitter and highly public conflict that has completely divided these two powerful men over the past few months in early 2026. Just a few weeks ago, the entire political landscape was heavily shaken to its absolute core when the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission officially took the former Kaduna State governor into their custody on the 19th of February. This massive development came shortly after an incredibly explosive television interview where Malam Nasir El-Rufai openly claimed that his private team had actively intercepted and completely listened to a highly private phone conversation belonging to the National Security Advisor himself. During that highly controversial broadcast, the former governor alleged that he heard Nuhu Ribadu actively giving direct orders for his immediate arrest, a claim that completely shocked the nation and aggressively sparked a massive debate about privacy, political targeting, and the highly intense race toward future elections. The deeply intense, massive fallout from that specific interview was absolutely entirely unprecedented. The national government strongly condemned the alleged phone tapping as a completely illegal act, while supporters of the former governor loudly argued that he was simply being unfairly targeted for his strong political views and his highly vocal opposition. For several highly tense weeks, Malam Nasir El-Rufai remained in official custody, and the massive tension between his deeply loyal political camp and the highest levels of the national security apparatus reached an absolute boiling point. Many highly respected political analysts completely believed that the deeply fractured relationship between El-Rufai and Ribadu, two highly prominent men who were once deeply united as founding members of the ruling party, was entirely and permanently broken beyond any massive repair. The entire complicated situation began to rapidly unfold last year when the massive National Senate officially entirely rejected the former governor's highly anticipated nomination to serve as a powerful federal minister. Following that highly controversial massive rejection, his active political successor in Kaduna State rapidly commenced a highly massive official probe into his previous administration, specifically looking deeply into massive state debts and heavily complex financial matters. The absolute heartbreaking reality of losing a deeply beloved mother completely changed the massive political temperature overnight. In a highly commendable and deeply massive show of absolute humanity and deep respect for cultural traditions, the Anti-Corruption Commission immediately authorized the complete official release of the former governor so he could actively deeply mourn his beloved mother and properly prepare for her highly important final massive rites. The National Security Advisor was actually one of the very first highly prominent public figures to actively openly send a message of deep condolences to his massive political rival. He publicly took directly to his official social media platforms to deeply express how entirely saddened he was to learn of the passing of the great matriarch, actively heavily praying that the Almighty would completely forgive her shortcomings and grant her eternal rest. This incredibly massive early gesture of pure absolute humanity completely set the perfect stage for the highly remarkable events that unfolded entirely perfectly today in the massive Federal Capital Territory. The deeply sad news of her passing actively triggered an absolute outpouring of heartfelt condolences from every single corner of the deeply divided Nigerian political space. Even those who have been actively engaged in incredibly fierce political disagreements with the former governor immediately dropped their political swords to deeply honor the absolute memory of a woman who completely dedicated her entire life to the active nurturing of her deeply massive family and her beloved community. The massive remains of Hajiya Umma safely landed in the national capital of Abuja, and the official announcement was rapidly made by her deeply grieving grandson, representing the entire family, stating that the deeply important final prayers would officially take place at exactly 1 in the afternoon today at the National Mosque. It was at this highly incredible gathering that the cameras actively captured the incredible presence of the National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, deeply and actively participating in the solemn prayers right alongside the completely grieving former governor. He actively deeply arrived directly alongside the highly revered former Emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, bringing even more highly absolute traditional and political absolute weight to the deeply highly solemn occasion. The national chairman of the ruling party was also actively completely present, having earlier deeply visited the grieving family completely at their private residence to actively completely offer the absolute official condolences of the entire massive ruling party structure. Following the incredibly deep, massive, highly solemn prayers at the National Mosque, the highly respectful crowd slowly, actively, completely moved toward the deeply Gudu cemetery, located in the deeply popular Apo massive area of the capital city. It was completely here, under the afternoon absolute sun, that the completely highly beloved matriarch was finally and laid to absolute perfect rest, entirely surrounded by deeply loving family members and powerful national figures who completely paused their deeply busy lives to honor her massive memory. The entire massive, absolute, highly complex events of today actively completely provide an incredibly massive, deep, and highly profound absolute lesson for every single deeply, highly active, massive political observer, an entirely ordinary citizen actively following the massive political trajectory of this deeply massive nation. It completely serves as a highly, deeply, massive, powerful, absolute reminder that completely and absolutely entirely beneath the incredibly massive, highly aggressive political absolute battles, the deeply massive, highly intense absolute corruption probes, and the completely entirely deeply heated absolute television interviews, these powerful absolute figures are completely, deeply, entirely still profoundly massive human beings who actively, deeply, completely share the absolute universal pains of deep absolute grief and total loss. While the highly deep political absolute tension completely existing perfectly between Malam Nasir El-Rufai and Malam Nuhu Ribadu may absolutely deeply entirely resume once the deeply massive official mourning period is completely deeply actively over, their incredibly deep respectful physical proximity today completely perfectly proves that they are completely deeply entirely still absolute cultural and completely deeply religious absolute lines that bring everyone entirely absolutely together. The completely deeply highly absolute reality of a mother's deep absolute love and her entirely complete final absolute passage completely deeply entirely transcended one of the completely absolute most bitter political feuds of 2026. We will absolutely, completely, deeply, entirely continue to monitor the political landscape as this absolute situation completely unfolds in the highly absolute coming days and weeks.